Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 4. Welcome to episode 4. Let's see if we got some feedback there. We're good to go. My name's Gus. If you haven't joined us before, this is Future Brunch. It is a fortnightly webinar series that we've been running this is our 4th episode. And today's episode is going to be a really, really good one because we are being joined by someone who is very near and very dear to us. So we're going to welcome my illustrious co-host and our guest very shortly. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to quickly run through a few technical things. This platform is called Crowdcast, and it's usually pretty good with webinars. If you have a bit of trouble, though, and the video feed is starting to fritz, the best thing to do is just to refresh the window that you're in, and that usually sorts the problem out. From our side, our internet's pretty fast. We've made sure that we won't have any technical glitches this side. So if you are struggling, just try to refresh your window, and that usually does the trick. The other thing to remember is that while the best version of this is the live version, because we get to interact and ask questions, I'll tell you about that in a second. If you totally cannot follow things and the internet is really struggling, then we will record this session, and then when the session is finished, we'll send out a link to everyone afterwards. In terms of how your screen works at the bottom over here, it's quite nice with these webinars, and the reason that we choose Crowdcast is because there's a number of ways of interacting with the speakers. So at the bottom over there, you can see that it's possible to ask a question. So if you have a specific question for our guest, Rebecca Tapp, that you'd like to answer, please put it in the question box at the bottom there where it says ask a question. You just have to click. And then if anyone else would like to have a look at those questions, you can vote them up and down depending on which ones the crowd would like answered. We'll also run a few polls down at the bottom over there. We'll get into that a little bit later. We'll also be using, and then the chat window, which is over here on this side, you can use that to make commentary. You can use that to interact with people. You can use that so that's general. That's basically the peanut gallery is the best way to think about that. So that's the kind of technical setup. Enough of the technical stuff. I am going to ask, I'm going to invite in my, I'm going to invite in Tane Hunter, who, let's see here, and welcoming in my co-host, Tane. Good morning.
Good morning. How is everyone? Loud and clear, Gus?
Sounding good.
All right, cool. I'm seeing people from Colorado, from the Appalachians to Invercargill, which is the southern tip of New Zealand. So literally we're not only from top to the bottom of the globe, but also on almost opposite sides. So that's really cool. Thanks everyone for joining us. Lots of love. And even some people from Melbourne where we're streaming from today.
So in today's session, we're going to be trying to unpack this word, purpose. And to do that, we are thrilled to welcome in a guest who is someone that we've known for 5 or 6 years now, and someone who we've done a lot of work with over the years. She is both a good friend and a fantastic business colleague. Would like to welcome in Rebecca Tapp, who is a Future Crunch director and also the host of Decoding Purpose podcast. Good morning, Bex.
Good morning. How are you?
Great.
Yeah.
Better now you're here.
I'm so excited to be here, and I can't wait to decode purpose with you guys.
Fantastic. There is if we do have some audio issues, we will try to sort it out as we go through. I think we've managed to sort most of the audio. If anyone is picking up any technical difficulties, just announce it in the chat room, which is on this side of the screen, and Tane will see if he can try and fix it. Okay, let's get into it. Bex, we usually open with this question. What is the thing that has surprised you most about the last few months since the crisis hit? What has been the thing that has been most surprising to you?
Yeah, look, I've thought about that question, having watched the last few Future Brunch sessions, and I guess for me it was the personal experience I had of COVID-19, in that, as you guys know, I'm somebody who thrives on being busy, thrives on the big picture, seeing the future, and that's something that really gives me momentum and gives me energy in terms of how I show up as a professional. And when COVID-19 hit, I felt like if there was an elastic band between the present moment and the future, which I was so busy building, it was like a big pair of scissors just came down and cut that elastic band in half, literally throwing me on my backside. And I think there was probably 3 weeks there where I was like, I had no energy. I just couldn't find the normal momentum, the normal sense of ambition that I normally had really just dried up, and I felt a little whiplashed for a while. But the beautiful thing about that, and this is probably the best thing that I got from that experience, was what I actually learned. And what really surprised me the most is that maybe decoding purpose isn't about purpose at all, as in purpose being something that exists in the future. Maybe it's about being purposeful. Maybe it's about how we show up in the moment. And so that really took me off on a little bit of a tangent again about, well, what is purpose? And as you guys know, I've literally spent the last 2 or 3 years or longer really decoding purpose, because I had personally found, as had a lot of the corporate organizations I have worked with over the years, that purpose is kind of this big lofty concept, and we throw it around and we talk about the purpose economy and purpose-driven business, but actually when it comes to the crux of the matter, nobody really knows what it is. And that was when I went on this mission to decode purpose. So within the context of COVID-19, when I had that experience prior to COVID, I'd kind of thought purpose was something that existed in the future. It was our North Star. So therefore it was our guiding light and something that we were moving towards. And that in itself was what created the energy in motion that we experience as being purpose. COVID-19 came and kind of threw that idea out the window for me, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, where's my North Star gone? It's been ripped out of the sky. But what happened for me is in that moment, there was a shift where I was kind of like, well, hang on a minute. This North Star is something that exists within me. And that is the intuitive pull of purpose. It's that inner compass. It's that part of us, that instinctual part of us that knows what the next right step is, to use Julie Masters' language. It's the part of us that is courageous enough to pioneer and to have that kind of inner guidance that just knows where to go. And that's something that I've really seen come into play with COVID-19, because all of a sudden people have realize that North, maybe not consciously, but realize that North Star is within us. And in doing so, have on the background of a crisis, ask themselves 3 questions. And those questions are, well, I can't do anything else right now. I'm in the political straitjacket, as you would frame it, Gus, whereby my livelihood is being threatened. My life is being threatened in the context of a health crisis. And then there's also the aspect of, well, what happens if we can't uphold our freedom? And for anyone wanting to read that article, please jump onto the Future Crunch website. But if you put that into context, as individuals, we're standing in the middle of that. And that feels incredibly helpless. And all we can do in that moment is go, well, I can either be a victim and crawl up in a little ball in the corner and do nothing, or I can do the opposite of helplessness, which is, well, how can I help? How can I heal? And how can I build hope at this moment in time? And anybody who I believe is navigating this period of time with a level of certainty has stepped into that level of service. That's why we're doing these Future Crunch webinars. It's why I have a COVID-19 segment on my podcast. It's why we are celebrating professionals who are in service, whether that be the nurses, the grocery workers, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. There's a bunch in there to unpack. I want to kind of maybe backtrack a little bit before we start unpacking this word purpose. Tanya and I, Tanya, we've spoken about this word purpose quite a lot over the last few years, and not always in a positive way, right?
Yeah, purpose always seems like a word that's thrown around. It's kind of intangible. It's kind of like sustainability, you know? It's like, let's all be sustainable. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean not using plastic straws? Does that mean taking out your recycling, you know, diligently? Make sure you've got a compost heap. You know, it's one of those terms that it's very hard to get direction. And one of the coolest things about talking with you, Bex, is that you define that purpose. You draw purpose out within people so they can use it to drive what they do, not only in their personal lives, but within organizations, businesses, and to make a difference. So, yeah.
So, Bex, I wanted to ask you a question. I mean, this as Tane said over here, purpose just gets thrown around. I mean, if you go to any corporate website or you speak to anyone and they all have a purpose, or they say, you know, we have to have a really great culture in organization because our organization has a defined purpose. Isn't it just a word that's like a nice to have? Isn't it just a marketing gimmick?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think there are definitely a few myths about how the word purpose is used, and also a few myths around what is called the purpose economy. Now, I'm sure you guys would have heard that term thrown around over the last 5 or 10 years. And in essence, the idea of the purpose economy is a good one. So don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing that we're encouraging businesses to give back and to be concerned about the greater good. That's a really awesome thing. And for those of you who may not have heard of what the purpose economy is, the purpose economy is this idea that there has been a convergence of trends come together at this particular point in time. Those trends include, for example, the millennial values, that millennials, who are the biggest generation to exist, are coming through the workplace and are commanding that they want to work for purpose-driven organizations. Then there's also trends around digitization and the attention economy, and this idea that if we are a purpose-driven business, that we are able to cut through with a narrative that is about the greater good. Then there are also other trends within that around trust, and this idea that we distrust business a lot more than we did in the past. I think over the last 3 years, trust in leaders and business has dropped something like 13%. Don't quote me on that. There are these trends that are converging that, from a marketing perspective, pull together a narrative that it's good to be doing good in business. But and that's great. That's a really great thing. But the problem with that is the purpose is so much bigger than that. And firstly, purpose isn't just for the privileged. So if we look at that idea, well, let's really think about that. You need to be a profitable business to have a purpose at that level in the first place. It's one thing for Adidas to say, hey, you know, I'm going to go out and we're going to collaborate with regards to collecting ocean plastics to make shoes. That's awesome, but you already need to have a profitable model in order to do that. If you look at the idea of conscious consumerism, you need to have money to be able to consume in an ethical way because it actually costs more. Purpose is not just for the privileged, and it's not just for businesses that are doing well. Purpose is fundamentally for everyone. And I just want to loop this back into your article, Gus, with regards to the projection of the economy. The idea of the purpose economy has been built upon this idea that if you create purpose in business, that's going to lead to profit and growth. Now, that misses the whole point, because the point of purpose should actually be about building sustainability. That should be the focus. The focus should be looking at how do we collectively thrive? And that model sits more within a circular economy. Or some of the ideas that we presented, for example, from Kate Rayworth or Mariana Mazzucato, if I pronounced that correctly. I don't know if I did. And that's your area, Gus. But I think there are some definitely interesting themes there about really what purpose is about.
Okay, so I mean, I understand. So what we're talking about here is we're trying to redefine purpose to become something that's bigger than just a marketing term, or even something that just businesses do. Purpose is something that is for everyone. Given what this incredible shock to the system that we've all had, I think a lot of us are kind of feeling a bit out at sea. So is there a way that people can redefine their own personal purpose? Is there sort of a series of steps they can take, or any tips or hints that you have for people to try uncover, I suppose, a new sense of purpose given everything that's happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk about purpose as being a lot like DNA. So again, this is Kane's area. We're going to dive into some basic genetics here. But if you think about this idea of discovering our purpose, I think the first thing to consider is that purpose is a unique code, just like our DNA is a unique code. I also believe that purpose, like DNA, is something that we inherit. So if you think about that, we inherit our DNA, we inherit our natural talents. It's influenced by culture, belief systems, and values that we also inherit. So it's similar to DNA in that sense. But DNA is also something that exists beyond us. So like purpose, we create a legacy. So when we have a child, we pass on our DNA. But think about this idea of purpose. We can build a business and then leave that business. We leave a legacy. We can work in a role and then leave that role, but we have still left behind our purpose in that we have built something and created something. So DNA are quite similar, and purpose are quite similar in that sense. And then finally, I think the other interesting thing to consider is DNA is something that evolves as a result of the environment. Well, so is our purpose. And that is why, I spoke before about how my understanding of purpose and my own purpose has evolved in the context of COVID-19. That's an example where our connection to meaning and purpose is something that shifts and evolves, like in the same way epigenetics affect our actual DNA. Now, I want to set that up just to give you context. To go into the activation of purpose, or the uncovering of purpose, to use the language that we use to promote this webinar, I believe that the discovery of purpose happens in two steps. We have the uncovering of purpose, then we have the discovery phase. So with the uncovering of purpose, I want to, give you a little bit of a metaphor. And if you can visualize for a moment, you've taken yourself out into uncharted land, and you're standing there in the middle of the desert, and it's an archaeological dig. And you're like, okay, well, I've got to look to my past to be able to uncover three things that are really going to determine what my purpose is. Now, these three things I refer to as being the purpose Trinity. And they are three T's, hence the Trinity, which include talents. So think about this. We've just spoken about the DNA example. What do we inherit? So what are our natural talents? Now, to give you an example, Mozart, as an example, could play the piano by the age of 4. By 5, Mozart was composing music. And unbelievably, his sister was also an incredible musician. There is something about that where he has literally inherited that talent. But you can use even more basic examples of that. Like, Gus, I don't think you're tall enough to be a basketball player. It's just not in your genes. And that's the other thing about purpose. Like your genes, it doesn't lie. If you don't have a talent, you just don't have a talent. But if you do, it's something that is easy for you. It's something that has flow. It's something that makes you feel joyful. Now, the second one to consider here is time. Now, I don't know if anyone out there has read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, but he talks specifically about the 10,000 hours it takes to master something. So think back, if you look back to the past, where have you put your focus? Where have you chopped wood? Where have you applied discipline? Where have you put in the hours and done the work? Where have you showed up time and time again? And that is where you would have achieved some level of mastery to become the person that you are today. So from there, we have talent, we have time. Then the final one is trials. So where have you experienced key trials in your life? What has challenged you? Where have you experienced pain or suffering or anger or grief? Literally, what has broken your heart wide open? And I think really this is significant, the trial part. And even if you haven't had a trial, you might have held somebody else's hand who has had a trial. But at some point, those experiences are what really enable that inner transformation. And in opening up that heart, we open ourselves up to empathy. And this is a key in the activation of purpose. Because from here, what happens is we almost, through that empathy, walk up onto a bridge where we're stood in this bridge and we've got these three gifts. We've got the gift of our talent, the gift of where we've spent our time, and then we've got the gift of the trials that we have endured, the transformations that we have had over the course of our lifetime. And as we stand on this bridge and we open to empathy, it's from here we look to the future. Now, the interesting thing about this is right now we're on this bridge, but we're standing in fog. We can't actually see that future. We can't see that North Star. And this is where the DNA of purpose model comes in. So I spoke before about DNA as a symbol of purpose, and now I want to talk about it as an acronym. So to break that down for you, the DNA...
Give us 2 seconds here before we dive into the acronyms. I just want to hold off. I want to just give us a breather because we're going to then dive into the DNA. Give us a second. I just want to sort of unpack a few things. Tane, do you have any questions at this point? I just wanted to give us a little pause. We're going to get into the DNA.
I just love the idea of purpose being an inner compass. It's sort of your guiding light. It's a lens through which you look at the world and make decisions. I think that fundamentally that is the blueprint of what we're trying to get down to. Yeah. And that as a DNA geneticist, as a scientist like that, your DNA sort of defines everything else that comes from the atomic level up. And if your purpose is strong and solid and you really have the right belief, the right purpose, then that's incredibly powerful because everything grows exponentially from that point. So I think of it as a compass, a guiding light, or the base, the bottom of the pyramid upon which everything else is built. That's what I'm really getting strongly from this. And before we go into the Trinity and the DNA, just that solid base is what really guides me. And you really helped me realize that Bex.
A couple of, if people want to ask Bex any questions, please, there's just at the bottom of the screen over here, there's a question over there. And I think we might also see if we can try create a bit of a poll. I still want to come, Bex, I'm wondering about 2 or 3 minutes. I wonder if it's possible, do you think this is a quick exercise that we could do at home for people who are on this call?
Yeah.
We could maybe ask everyone to just maybe like sort of put down or get a piece of paper and maybe see if they can write down a few things around what purpose could be or how they could do it.
I mean, basically what I would advise is get your piece of paper and actually just put a line straight through the middle of the page. On one side, we have the uncovering of purpose.
Yep.
And what we have there is literally talent.
Yep.
Time, trials. So jot down those 3 titles and just give yourself some time to journal and let it flow and just write some words down and get yourself thinking about it. What I want to say with this work is that it's also deeply unconscious. So literally, we use the word uncovering, but allow it to surface. But you might find, I spoke to you guys before, I have a meditation that goes with the uncovering of purpose, which I will record later and maybe shoot across that we can maybe share with everyone to download. But it is a deeply unconscious process. So just allow it to surface. You don't have to have all the answers in this session today. The intention of this key is to get you to start peeling the layers of the onion. Hence why, you know, my whole process is about decoding purpose, because I think people make a mistake to think there is one very clear, definitive answer, where decoding purpose is decoding you. It's decoding your mission in life. It's your reason for being. That's not something that needs to come to you at the end of this webinar. It's a process. It's a way of being. And again, to paraphrase something I kicked off with, it's not about purpose. It's about purposefulness. How do we be purposeful?
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 3-minute break here, and we're going to invite people at home, wherever you are tuning in, at home or wherever your location is, to maybe just take a pause, take a deep breath, or 2 or 3, get out a piece of paper, or you could possibly even use your phone, whatever writing implement you have to hand, and maybe just jot some ideas around these 3 things: talents, time, and trials. And I've written them in the you can see them in the chat box over there. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, we're just going to give everyone a bit of time to do that, and then we'll come back in and we'll unmute everybody.
I'm going to do it, and I hope I get gold stars because I know there's a right answer. Tell me I got a right answer, man.
All right, we're going to give everyone about 30 more seconds to do that, and then we're going to get back up and carry on asking Beck some questions. All right, might want to slowly start wrapping that up. If I had a little bell, I would use it, but unfortunately, I'm not nearly that spiritual or woke, so no bells to get us out of that one. Tane, how many gold stars did you earn?
Probably 0, because there are no right answers to this. I really wish there were, but got us into the first question, Bex, and then maybe I'll tell you what my response was, and you can digest it from there. How about that?
Guide you into a question with regards to what
the purpose, Trinity, like what I mean with talents.
Hold on 2 secs. We'll get there. What I also wanted to ask is just if everyone can, if you want to ask any questions to Bex at the bottom over here and vote them up, please feel free to go check it out. There's one question that I like over here, and it might feed a little bit, Bex, maybe into this next stage. You've talked to us about uncovering purpose in this archaeological dig.
Mm-hmm.
You said that there were 2 stages.
Yes, correct.
And there's someone at the bottom over here who's asked a great question, which said that does purpose evolve? I mean, DNA evolves. So does your own personal purpose evolve?
Absolutely.
So how would you answer that?
Well, my answer to that is that I believe that purpose is like our DNA, in that we're born with our DNA. That part doesn't change. So there is an element of purpose that is the anchor and that is unchanging. Just in the same way that there is parts of DNA that never change, like your eye color is not going to change. Your hair color is not going to change. There are certain parts of that code that provide a framework. That said, like epigenetics, things will happen in the world that will change how we express that purpose. So, for example, you guys are speakers. I'm a speaker as well. So our former mechanism of purpose was to go out to big events and talk on stages. Now, we can't do that anymore. We can't use that mechanism because the world has changed. So we literally have had to evolve how we show up for our purpose. So in the case of Future Crunch, our purpose has always been intelligent optimism and sharing intelligent optimism. But our mechanism for purpose is now via this webinar because we can't stand on a stage and do a keynote. Does that answer the question? So what I would say is that our purpose is unchanging. Our mechanisms for purpose are in evolution.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Tane, you were going to talk about the Trinity. There's the first one. Sorry to have cut you off earlier over there.
No, that's right. There's just some audio issues, unfortunately. But yeah, I really do like, while you talk about the DNA of purpose, it's really epigenetics. It's about turning things on or off. DNA is pretty stock standard. Yeah. It's like the narrative and the story we tell ourselves. But you can take certain chapters, given certain environmental factors, certain times in life, and really rest your laurels on those and get inspiration from them. Just like your favorite poems. The one from Robert Frost, I took the road less traveled by, doesn't always fit for every situation. So drawing on different parts of purpose is really important. And that's what epigenetics is. Like a caterpillar has the same DNA as a butterfly. Mm-hmm. It's the environmental factors that turn it into a butterfly. And I think that's what's so important. You really need to have a strong, I guess, a pool of purpose and draw on what you can given a certain circumstance. And that's what this new pandemic has taught me. It's like I can't draw from all pools, all little wells, within my tool belt. Now I'm restricted to certain ones, and therefore it's really important to get the things right. So mm-hmm. Purpose is more important than ever now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, because I've spoken today about the North Star being something that exists within us. But that doesn't mean that it's not also the North Star, in that we can still have a vision for the future. We can still have the butterfly, but all we can focus on in this present moment is the DNA, which is the becoming.
I understand that. Yeah.
That is where the purpose exists within us. Our DNA exists within us. And it's what we do today that creates tomorrow. But that doesn't mean there's not that vision, that butterfly, that future that we're also working towards.
But I think so. That kind of leads me to this next question, Bex. And then, and once I've asked you this, I'd actually like to get into some of the stuff that people are asking down at the bottom over here.
Yeah.
So let's say you've uncovered your purpose. You know, you've done your time, you've done your talents, you've done your trials. You've got a bit of an idea here what your DNA of purpose is. How do you actually then go out and do this? I mean, is it just something that sits there as a vision statement on your wall, or how do you embed this into your everyday life, into everything that you do? What's the next step? I guess. What are some practical steps that people can take right now to actually start embedding purpose into what they do?
Definitely. Well, as I said before, when we look at the first phase, the uncovering phase, that's looking to the past. What we want to focus on in taking action is firstly the present moment and the creation of the future. So how do we do that? Now, I've come up with an acronym called the DNA of Purpose. And the DNA of Purpose is broken down into 3 key areas, which is firstly the decision. I have never met somebody who is fully embodying purpose who didn't make the decision to do so. But it's bigger than that. If we look at the idea of the decision, we are standing on a bridge to the future right now where we can't see the future. Everything is incredibly uncertain. So it's also the decision to courageously choose a future that we desire. We can either choose to be a leader in our lives, or we can choose to follow. And we can talk to this point from the point of view of the individual, of the people who are tuning into this webinar because they're wanting to understand personal purpose, or we can talk about this from an economic point of view at this point in time. Are we going to have the courage to choose again? What is our decision? From there, the second part of the DNA model is the narrative. And, you know, at Future Crunch, we're all about the narrative because we fundamentally understand the power of storytelling. But I want to really break this down because I think this part really explains the reason why people get a little bit lost in the wanky side of purpose and just throw it around without actually understanding what it really is. So I break up the narrative into 3 key areas. Now, firstly, we have the marketing why. Now, this is the bright, glossy why, like the Future Crunch. We're starting a movement of intelligent optimism. We are, but that also sounds really fantastic in our marketing material. Or for me, I amplify, voices changing the world. I do. Also, marketing collateral.
Yeah, it's sort of, you kind of throw up in your mouth a little bit with that stuff, isn't it? It just sounds it's too lofty. It's too much.
So, exactly. So let's get real about it. Now, to lean in a little bit to Kayla's message, firstly, you have the marketing why. Then you have the courageous why. Now, this is the why of the pioneer, of the entrepreneur, of the innovator. They're the people who believe that they can write a new story and do, and then they become it. They are the courageous pioneers. And the courageous why is the person who was driven by the revolution, who was driven by the change. And that's what motivates them. That is their why. Then underneath all of that, and this is one that I think has really been the catalyst for me to dive into the world of purpose, and that is understanding the vulnerable why. Now, the vulnerable why is a deeply personal story because it is the story you tell yourself about why you show up every day, about why you do the work. Now, for me, this really came from a space in my early 20s of going through quite a difficult time with mental health. And at that period of my life, I had to kind of go, well, you know what, I've got a lot of emotional work to do here. And in my case, that involved a lot of counseling and a lot of the real work, the deep work. And when you've got that road ahead of you, you've got to make a decision to show up and why are you going to do the work? And in that moment, for me, it was about choosing life. It was about going, you know what? I've got one or two decisions here. Again, I can crawl up in the corner and be a victim, or I can show up every day. And even if I can't articulate my reason for being here, I can show up knowing that there is a reason why I am here, and that makes my life worth it today. That's why I get up and do the work today. And that is a deeply vulnerable why. That's like getting to the grit of why am I here? Why am I even bothering with any of this? And so they're the three stories. You've got, yes, your marketing why, but then you've got your courageous why and your vulnerable why. And until we start talking about the full spectrum of why we do what we do, we're always going to feel like purpose is a lofty concept because we're not being honest about what it really is and what really drives us.
Okay, so what's the A?
The A is an alignment to purpose. So I've spoken a lot about this already today, and it's the internal North Star. It is the intuitive pull, but I want to break this up for you because I want to lean back into science a little bit since we're using the DNA model. Now, when we look at narrative, say we talk about the marketing why, that's a very, it's a cognitive story. It's a thought. It's in our brain. We can write it down.
Yeah.
But purpose is something that actually speaks to us at a visceral level. There is an idea that's thrown around a little bit called heart intelligence, and I think it's a really great way to capture the energy of purpose. Now, we all know when we are on purpose, we feel a sense of being alive. We will feel a sense of joy. The shoulders will go back. We will expand. It's almost that sense of soaring or flying when we feel like we are on purpose. The flip side of that is not being on purpose, where we literally, the shoulders are hunched. We literally feel a heaviness. We feel depressed. We see this in people around us. You know who is on purpose in your world, and you know the people who are miserable and disconnected. Now, this is an energetic response. This is heart intelligence. Our heart is going to fundamentally tell us whether we are on purpose or not, and it's not going to think it. It's something that we know inside of us. Yeah. Likewise, we also have that gut intuition. I mean, it's been spoken about for centuries, female intuition or gut instinct. These ideas have been thrown around, but think about the last time you couldn't cognitively make a decision. Fundamentally, you would have made that decision based on your gut. There's even been studies with regards to the vagus nerve, which is the nerve connecting the gut and the brain. And it's why we experience butterflies in our stomach, as an example, when we're nervous about something. Our guts and our brains are intrinsically linked. So we fundamentally, an alignment to purpose is also about listening to that gut instinct. Is this right? Is this wrong? Do I turn left? Do I turn right? It's an embodied feeling. And that is an alignment to purpose.
Oh, fantastic.
But even
that's perfect.
Yeah, the word integrity comes to mind when I think about alignment.
That's perfect, and it's also quite nice. It kind of, this lovely image, which by the way is from an artist called Ruben Wu, and I'll stick it up now actually, so if people want to look it up. He's got some really wonderful stuff on that. But that kind of really makes me think about that alignment, and I love the analogy of the gut and the brain. We've got about 15 minutes left in this webinar, so I actually would love to dive into some questions.
Yeah.
So let's have a look and see what's going on over here. The other thing I wanted to tell everyone before we dive into these questions is that you've got a podcast because you are a purpose geek. You have been talking about purpose for 2 or 3 years now, and you've got a bunch of fantastic episodes where you talk about purpose at length. And then the button at the bottom of the bottom over here, you can see it says Decoding Purpose. And if you want to follow that to Bex's podcast, you should go check it out. All right, Tane, let's get some questions here. Do you want to go through some questions
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, if you click on the questions tab, ask a question, you can upvote the questions. So the more upvoted, those are the ones that are going to be asked. So the top voted question is, Bex, Rebecca Tapp, can you share how you daily, weekly, monthly, by the minute, by the second, deliberately exercise your purpose? How do you come back into that state?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to come back to the narrative, because I think the story we tell ourselves is probably the most influential story we will ever connect with. So for me, I think showing up daily for my purpose, it's about being purposeful. So it's about really understanding, firstly, the vulnerable why, So for me, why am I showing up? Why have I got out of bed today? How can I help? How can I build? How can I build hope? And why does that matter? Because that's my legacy creation. So that's really aligned to why bother at all for me. But the other part of it is, if we go to the marketing why, mine is amplifying voices, changing the world. So that is my mantra, is what I'm focused on right now, amplifying voices, changing the world. And everything that I do really sits within that framework. And even if I look at my courageous why, what am I pioneering? What am I inventing? It still will sit within that framework of bringing all of those things together, bringing together the tools, the talents, the time, my vulnerable why, my marketing why, and what am I pioneering tomorrow? So for me, it's really about that narrative piece and really getting clear on what my stories are.
So, I mean, to sum it up for me, it's about continuing to ask a question, right? Just like courageous why. Why are you doing this?
Totally.
And it brings you back into presence, right? It's kind of like a mindfulness presence exercise to really stay on purpose, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think that you might know, but I think there are some studies that show that as soon as you ask a question, your brain can't help but answer it.
Yeah, there are actually epigenetic changes that go on and neurological pathways. Yeah.
There you go.
We won't get too nerdy into science. Gus, what's the next question?
So the next question is, this one is from Randall Dobbs. Thanks, Randall. Is an organization's purpose a stronger driver, or should people or clusters of people within that organization drive the purpose? So is purpose something that comes from the top down, from management, or is it something that comes from the bottom up, from the people within the organization? What's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so that's a big question, because what I'm going to say, maybe not everyone would agree with. And I love that organizations do have a purpose. I think that's an amazing thing. And as I said earlier in the webinar, anything that's about social impact and changing the world is good. So I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. I don't believe an organization can have purpose. I believe purpose is like DNA, and it is fundamentally human. And any organization who thinks they can have a purpose, can gift a purpose, can motivate a team with a purpose, doesn't understand purpose, because they haven't understood the purpose of that individual.
Yeah.
I think the trick for organizations is to really spend the time to understand your people. Purpose is not a CSR function, it is an HR function. And it's about really going deep with every individual in your organization, and then ensuring that their DNA is aligned to their role purpose, and then their role purpose is aligned to the organizational mission. I don't believe an organization has a purpose. People have purpose.
I love that answer. It's a great answer. And I love that it's slightly controversial as well. That's
exactly.
Really excellent.
To be nice to the HR people.
It is. I wholeheartedly believe that. You can't give someone purpose. It's theirs. You can't give someone their DNA.
Yeah. Okay, great other question here. Tane, there's a nice question that's got 3 votes at the bottom there.
So this is a really good one. What would you suggest for a teen or an adult who can't find their North Star? Tough question, but it's such a good one.
A teen or an adult who can't find their North Star? Well, firstly, let's start with the individual, and coming back to the question I just answered, purpose is deeply, deeply personal. So if they can't find their North Star, that's okay. Go into that process, firstly, of uncovering your purpose. So scan your past. Really spend the time, and don't rush it. This is deeply unconscious work. I often think purpose, I don't know if anyone out there has looked into Jungian psychology, and I'm not going to even go down that rabbit hole today, but Jung speaks specifically about the shadow self, and they're the parts of us that we hide away in our unconscious. I thoroughly believe that our purpose is often hidden in the unconscious parts of ourselves. And a part of our process of growth and transformation is uncovering purpose to bring it into the conscious mind. So that takes time and it takes work. But that said, my first piece of advice would be, we'll start doing that work. Start uncovering your purpose. Start going into a process where you step into the shadow to bring up your tools, your talents, and your trials. And that's where the hard work bit is. your trials may also bring up emotions. It may also bring up parts of you that need healing, that you need to look at. This is about peeling the layers of an onion. But that's the first part of the process. So if you can't see the North Star yet, well, let's look back. Let's do the work over here. Let's dive into the shadow and bring your tools, your talents, your time, the trials you've been through into the light. From there, we can then start to look at what is required to step into your DNA, which is the forward focus piece. And that's not about finding your North Star. That's about creating it and remembering who you already are.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think what I want to do now is this is a really great question. This one came from Mikey Leung.
I love Mikey. Hey, Mikey.
Michael from Digital Storytellers.
I know.
So given this is all well and good, but the world got turned upside down a few months ago, and the world is still upside down. You know, a lot of these ideas, these things that we were working towards from before the crisis hit, just suddenly feel like they're up. You know, and all this work that you've done around purpose, perhaps, you know, maybe it doesn't have as much context anymore. How have you found, you know, the sort of what have people done? Where was Mikey's question? Let me get back to it actually here. Sorry, give me 2 seconds.
So it's basically what has changed or will change with your purpose with the onset of COVID.
Yeah.
Either within yourself or within society as a whole.
And I'm interested in that society question, that bigger society question. How does COVID-19 change purpose on a societal level?
Yeah, I think on a societal level, Gus, this comes back to economics. And I might actually invite you to frame this up, Gus, just because this is your area. But I was reading through the work of Kate Rayworth in particular. And I might get you to talk a little bit about what that looks like, because I'm sure you'll do a much better job than I will. But I actually had jotted down their ideas under the courageous why. So these are economists who are really pioneering a brave new world that is moving away from this idea that we need to continually move towards growth and having more and having the GDP as this idea of a successful society, and pulling that back and going, actually, well, no, that's not success. What we need to do is find a circular economy where we exist in the very safe space between survival, ensuring our needs are met, and sustainability. Now, on a social level, I believe that, in essence, is a truthful purpose economy, because it is really about the planet and the people and ensuring everybody is looked after, that we are all cared for and nurtured and supported and have roofs over our head. And that is the tribe. That is the tribe. That is where I believe the future of purpose sits on the back of COVID-19. You may want to explain that model a little bit. You may explain that model a little more effectively than me.
I think you've explained it absolutely beautifully. People can read it. There's a link in the chat room over there. Is purpose something that is it an illusion that as human beings we spin up for ourselves? That, you know, we need to find meaning, you know, as superfluous sacks of meat spinning on a rock through space, and so we invent these lofty concepts like purpose, or is it something? Is it something more than that? This is a question that came here. Where is it? What makes purpose different for us as human beings as opposed to any other life form on the planet?
I don't believe it is different for us. The first response to that question for me was, does it matter? Does it actually matter? Because from my perspective, even if at the end of this life I dissolve into the soil, never to be heard of again, all that exists then is my story, my legacy. And that is a story that my daughter will take forward and tell her daughter or her son. That is a story that if I pioneer and build something bigger than myself that is still giving back after I've gone, then that is what purpose has created. So does it actually matter what it is? If it's something that means that my legacy here on this earth is a golden one.
Right.
I think perspective is very important here. It really depends on perspective. If you're looking at the planet as your perspective, then the environment, the entire biome, the health of the planet matters hugely. If you're looking down to your gut flora and fauna, your microbiome, then that perspective matters hugely as well, because we are an ecosystem within ourselves. So being able to like flexibly move through perspective and look at purpose through different perspectives is one of the most, I think, powerful things that anyone can do. It's not easy, it's intangible, it's almost impossible, you're going to fail, but like that ability to flexibly shift and look at other perspectives and the purpose, especially when the purpose is to make a better environment, I think that's one of my ultimate goals, one of my ultimate purposes. That's what I wrote down. Yeah.
Totally. And to use that example, it's like, well, what is the purpose of DNA? It's kind of, you're asking the same question. What is the purpose of purpose?
Yeah.
It's
getting too meta. Let's break out the meta.
Okay. So, Bex, so you've given us a taste of this incredible work that you've been doing over the last 2-3 years, but actually work that you've been doing over the last 10 or 20 years, it sounds like, around really, the only way I can think about it is you are a purpose geek. You know, that it really is about decoding purpose. People can go to your podcast where there are many episodes, and you've done something very quickly. I wonder if you could tell us very quickly what you've done around your podcast for COVID-19.
Yeah, so in coming back to where we started today, once I got over my 3 weeks of whiplash and I don't know what to do, I then was like, okay, right, well, what can I do? And what I do is produce a podcast. I'm very lucky that my partner in life, love, and business is also a music producer. So we have a recording studio. And I was like, okay, well, what I have are the resources to share really valuable information with people around how they navigate the pandemic with purpose. So from there, that's exactly what I did. I started a podcast series where I went out, I interviewed you guys. I also interviewed Julie Masters, some other incredibly bright minds who are in my network. And that was the other resource I had available to me to ask them what they thought. And hence I released the Turning Point, which is the COVID-19 part of the Decoding Purpose podcast. And there are some awesome interviews there.
Are there any that you would recommend? Top of the list, ones that were really good?
Of course, the Information Diet featuring
ours is the worst.
You can't use the Future Crunch one.
Well, look, the last episode I did was with an American guy from Oklahoma called David Burkus, and he's an incredible thought leader. He's had something like more than 2 million views of his TED Talk, written quite a few books, but his most recent book was called Pick a Fight, How Great Teams Do It with Purpose. And I loved his take, because the one thing we didn't realize with COVID-19 is that we would be going into a war. And for the first time, that wasn't a war where we'd be fighting each other, but we would come together to literally fight this other thing, being the virus. So we talk a lot about what purpose looks like in that context. When how do we form an army? How do we come together and create a shared mission? And how do we really fire ourselves up for the fight? And I think that so beautifully captures some of the energy of what purpose is that warrior energy of, right, let's do this and let's come together. And that's what we are all doing. As you know, as humanity united at this point in time. Yeah.
That's great. Look, we're going to slowly start wrapping it up. Bex and Tana, I'm going to pass over to you at the end just for any final thoughts. Before we do that, though, just wanted to tell people if they are interested in following Future Crunch, the other work that we do, we've got our social media over here. You can find that pretty easily. The other thing is that this webinar series is something still very new for us. We're still figuring it out. So if you have any suggestions, any things you'd like to see included more in the future, please let us know. And also, please tell people about it. We're doing this for free. We're doing this as a service because we think it's important. Our next guest, we will let you know who that's going to be, but I think our next episode might, we'll let you know through the newsletter. If you're not signed up to the Future Crunch newsletter, you should go to our website. There's a button there that says subscribe. The newsletter is free. These webinars are free. And we hope that you've really enjoyed today's episode. And we also hope that you'll join us in thanking Bex, who has been awesome in just helping us uncover purpose. So that's everything from my side. Tane, I'm going to leave it over to you. And then Bex, maybe you can leave us with some final words.
Cool. Yeah, I think this idea of the world uniting, I read, instead of the term war, I'd use purpose. We're uniting for a global purpose. Instead of like combatants, we're protecting each other and improving the health of not only ourselves, but the environment. I think this could be the great turning or the great unraveling. It's up to us. And if we get the purpose right, if we get the narrative right, then I think we can really do a lot of great things. And so in this unprecedented dark times, that North Star is shining pretty bright. We just need to move forward towards it.
Yeah, and just to frame the piece on Pick a Fight, it's funny, David said he got a lot of pushback around the languaging of that book, and I've noticed a few comments come up. It's a war of love. It's not a war. It's just this idea of everyone coming together as warriors of love. His intention was not to be violent in any way. So just to frame that up for everyone. And finally, I feel so grateful to be here, and mostly so grateful to be a part of the Future Crunch family and to be included on the Future Brunch series. So thank you so much for having me, Gus and Tane.
Thanks, Bex. We hope to see you all 2 weeks from now for the next webinar.
Yeah, love to everyone. Love in the time of Corona. And wash your hands after the session, please.
Great.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.